In 1742, a dilapidated boat reached the shore of a small Brazilian village. Inside were 30 emaciated, barely living sailors. Their stories of disaster and miraculous survival shocked contemporaries. These men were survivors from the British warship Voyager, which sank during the Anglo-Spanish War in the mid-18th century. Their incredible story is both a gripping maritime adventure and a demoralizing tale of human struggle for survival. Welcome to the world of Paradoria. Enjoy watching. The crew of the Voyager left England in 1740. A British squadron under the command of Commodore George Anson was heading to the Pacific Ocean to strike Spanish colonies and capture a treasure-laden galleon. The Voyager, a 28-gun frigate originally built as a merchant ship, was to supply land forces with cannons and provisions. On board were around 250 strong sailors and soldiers. But the British sailors faced harsh trials as they entered the Pacific. The polar north winds and the raging waves of Cape Horn scattered Anson's ships in all directions. Navigation was almost blind. There were no reliable maps. Instruments only vaguely measured longitude, and many sailors died of scurvy. Even the original commander of the Voyager died of illness, and his deputy, David Cheap, took command. But soon his crew also suffered terrible losses. In spring 1741, the Voyager accidentally entered a large bay on the southern coast of Chile. On the evening of May 13th, it struck hidden rocks at full speed. In the middle of a violent storm, the ship was thrown onto the rocky shore of an archipelago off Chilean Patagonia. In that horrific moment, about 140 men managed to reach land. The rest drowned or were buried under the overturned hull. But the survivors still had unimaginable trials ahead. The massive Voyager was smashed to pieces, but fragments of sails and planks were washed ashore. The sailors raised the alarm. The threat was not only from nature. When many of the exhausted and weakened men saw each other, discipline collapsed. About 80 men, led by gunner John Bulkley, mutinied against Captain Cheap and forced him to hand over the boat and supplies. This boat, refitted into a small schooner named Speedwell, became their only hope for salvation. About 60 sailors, including the captain, remained on Voyager Island, hoping only for a miracle. Conditions on the island were extremely harsh. Winter in Patagonia was brutal, with icy winds, and food quickly ran out. Scurvy, hunger, and cold showed no mercy. The natural needs and fear of the mutiny's consequences heightened conflicts among the men. Modern estimates suggest that of the 140 who made it ashore, most soon died of hunger, exposure, or even violence. Dozens died right before their comrades' eyes. Meanwhile, Bulkeley's group was preparing for a desperate voyage. From wreckage, they built rafts and a boat and stocked the last of their provisions. Their goal: to return to the eastern coast and reach some form of civilization. The path ahead stretched 1,000 miles across the stormy Atlantic, but they had no other option. The direct route home across the Pacific was cut off. In November 1741, once the storms had calmed, Bulkley and around 30 of the hardiest men set out. They had no instruments. The compass only indicated a rough direction, and chronometers had yet to be invented, so they estimated longitude by the sun and stars. No one knew exactly where they would land, but all understood that their only alternative was death. By January 1742, a near miracle occurred. On January 28, 1742, the makeshift vessel of wood scraps and sails carrying 30 starving sailors reached the coast of Brazil. This boat had crossed at least 2,500 nautical miles, around 4,600 kilometers. Virtually the entire stormy ocean near Tierra del Fuego, making it one of the most remarkable journeys of desperate sailors in history. Along the way, the Voyager paid a terrible price. 7 soldiers and sailors had to be thrown overboard during storms, several died of scurvy and hunger, and by the end of this nightmare voyage, the remaining 30 were barely alive. The inhabitants of the Brazilian village where the battered sailors landed welcomed them as a miracle. Stories of their heroism spread everywhere. The return of the ghost ferry with triumphant news of Anson's horrific expedition. The Voyage's sailors received monetary rewards, praise, and aid. It seemed the monstrous story had ended well. The sailors claimed they had not turned pirates, nor abandoned the ship willingly. And England gradually began to forget this episode. But 4 years later, the ghost of the second part of the crew returned. 3 men, Captain David Cheap and 2 officers, arrived in Britain, previously believed dead. These men had been taken prisoner by the Spanish. After a failed second voyage attempt, they surrendered to native guides and were sent to Spanish colonies in Chile. Most of their group died on the way from exhaustion and cold. But Cheap and his companions survived and, after the war ended, reached home in 1745-46, returning 4 years after their crewmates. They told a completely different story. According to them, the 30 Brazilians were not heroes, but joined the mutineers and committed atrocities. They claimed Bulkley and his men had seized the boat from the captain, and the sailors suffered and even died due to chaos and officer cruelty. Mutual accusations followed. Who was telling the truth, the survivors from Brazil or the later returned sailors? The Admiralty convened a military tribunal to investigate. The hearings lasted several months. Both sides presented grave accusations against each other. The first spoke of tyranny and murder, the second of mutiny and brutality. The outcome of the trial determined the lives of the accused. Mutiny was punishable by death. This sensational story became public knowledge. The chronicle of the terrible voyage was discussed in newspapers and letters. Today, the details of the Voyager tragedy have been clarified by historians through ship logs and eyewitness testimonies. It's known that neither the court nor its verdict removed the mysterious aura from this story. It revealed how, in extreme survival conditions, people are capable of actions unthinkable in ordinary life. On a tiny raft, they fought for life, and on the island, with each other. Though the Voyager has long rested on the seabed off the Patagonian coast, its story still chills the heart. It reminds us that the power of the ocean and hunger surpass ordinary moral laws. Share your thoughts about this incredible story in the comments. Like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.